Hey guys!
Hey friends!
Welcome back to Spaghetti for Your Thoughts podcast. I'm Jenika.
And I'm Greta.
Thank you guys for joining us today.
Yes, indeed.
We have a very special, exciting episode planned for you guys today.
We do.
I am going to be interviewing Greta all about her amazing, fascinating job.
Ooh, amazing and fascinating.
I think it's both those things.
I do too.
So it's a unique job for sure.
Definitely is.
And people want to know about it.
Do they?
So we're going to dish it today.
I'm excited.
So, Greta.
Yes, ma'am.
Just before we jump in to the questions, I want you to just quick tell people what your job title is and a brief synopsis of what you kind of do.
Okay. So for those of you who are listening who don't know, I am a mortuary apprentice / funeral directing apprentice, or a mort, as we call it in the biz.
Oh, really? That's cute.
M-O-R-T, mort.
I like it.
I was told that. I don't know how. I've never heard it apart from my boss.
You don't tell people you're a mort.
I'm a mort. Well, because imagine me going up to a stranger and be like, I'm a mort. And
right.
they're like, what the poo? But anyway, I'm a mortuary apprentice, funeral directing apprentice. And basically what I do is what a funeral director would do, which is plan funerals, run funerals. We pick up bodies. We embalm them. I dress people. I do their makeup. I put them in a casket. I transport people to and from the crematory. I handle ashes.
It's intense.
Yeah. So basically just anything that is involved in a funeral, I have done and do every single day.
Really cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
So let's jump in. We put a question box up on Instagram for our viewers.
Thank you for those of you who are following at Spaghetti for Our Thoughts on Instagram.
Yes, please go follow if you're not and you're interested in doing so. But we got some really good questions.
I'm excited.
I'm excited to hear what people want to know and to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so our first question is from Gertie Duck.
Hi, Gertie Duck.
Hi, Gertie Duck. Thank you for your question. He would like to know, what made you want to become a funeral director / mortician?
Okay, so it's kind of I don't know what everyone else's origin story is. A lot of the time in this business, people go into this business because of their family. Like it was a family-owned business. So if you're raised around it, you just go, I'm just going to do what my dad does.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You grow up in the funeral industry. That's a huge part of why people join the business. For me, I don't have any family members who are a part of it. I don't know anybody in the industry personally until now. For me, what it was I was watching Netflix. Shout out to all my Netflix people out there. Mostly just Jen.
Sponsor us.
Sponsor us, Netflix. But I was watching the TV show, I think it came out in like 2018, called Haunting of Hill House.
Oh my goodness.
A good show.
I feel like I didn't even know that was
Did you not know this?
Like was the beginning of your thoughts on
There's
it.
a lot of things that led up to it, which I'll cover, but it kind of started with that, where there's a character in the show named Cheryl. I can't remember who plays her, but anyway, I was a mortician, funeral director, and I was just watching the show and thinking, that's really interesting. I would like to see what that's about. So I did more research. I went on YouTube and I watched interviews, like I think it was a variety interview. There's a mortician, his name is Victor Sweeney. He answered a lot of questions online. I thought this is really interesting. And then it was also one of those weird things where, when you're about to start something new, like you go to a different school or you go start a new relationship, or you go on this big adventure and you kind of see signs everywhere that kind of point you toward, like, I think this is something I should do. Well,
little God winks.
Yeah, little God winks. I was driving around town one day and like I drove by this car impound, like where they were working on cars, and there was a hearse there, which actually is the hearse that I drive now.
Whoa.
But anyway, I just was thinking about it, and as I was thinking, I look over and there's a hearse right there, and it was just one of those weird things.
Like,
and then I think I saw and then I saw one day I was driving and I saw someone's bumper sticker said like, my other ride is a hearse, and like I just kept seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
So I felt called to do it, and then I had a friend who knew this funeral director and kind of hooked me up with him, and it
kind of just fell into place.
Yeah, it just fell into place as these things do. And I started, and here I am 3 years later.
Okay, I don't know if this is jumping the gun.
No, please.
But I am curious to know, because your initial thoughts on it came from Haunting of Hill House and this lady's job.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that was an accurate depiction of what that job entails now that you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool.
I've rewatched the show several times because it's so good. Check it out if you haven't.
It's terrifying.
But she describes her job to somebody and is like, this is how it goes. And then they had some B-roll that was like showing her embalming somebody.
Okay.
And I remember watching it with my husband, Thomas, and we were watching it and she's embalming someone. I'm like, oh, I know what that is. Oh my word. She has the string wrapped around the artery and like.
Yeah. So it's accurate.
Yeah. And I was like, this is accurate.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know.
That's a sidebar I want to tell you guys is that in movies, when you see like dead bodies, at least the movies I've watched, and like funeral directing and embalming and things like that, I have been really surprised at how accurate things have been in the movies.
Really?
Or how dead bodies do look like
they
that.
do in the movies.
Pretty often. There's a few exceptions where I'm like, that seems kind of unrealistic, but overall I've been really surprised.
Yeah. Okay, like the coloring of the person.
Yeah, I'm just like, wow, that does look like a dead body. Like, good job.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Okay, moving on. Yep. Very truly, Anna has asked us quite a few questions here, which is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
She's asked, what surprised you most about your job after getting into it?
I feel like this is kind of like a not exciting answer, but I think something that surprised me was I initially also wanted to get into the job because I wanted to help people. I didn't want to just sit at a desk and run numbers and do stuff like that. I wanted to really be hands-on.
Make a difference. And
I had a heart for helping people, and you have to have that to be in this industry. If you're just there to work with dead people or to just...
The sick fascination of it.
Which you have to have that to a certain degree because that's the reality is you work with dead bodies, but if that's all that you're going in for, you're not going to last very long. You have to have a heart for people, which is the thing that drove me the most to be there. But what I was surprised by was my favorite parts of my job are usually when I'm not working with a family, which was surprising because I wanted to be there to help people. Right. But I find that when I'm by myself, just doing like dressing somebody or putting on their makeup, that to me is the most satisfying part of my job. And so I was surprised that like talking to people and planning a funeral isn't necessarily my favorite thing, or even being at a funeral, like handing out flyers and greeting people. I thought I would enjoy that more than I have. Not that I don't enjoy it, but I just don't prefer it to the other parts of the job.
But do you feel like that's what keeps you there, though?
Definitely.
Is the fact that you're supporting families in there.
Because that's what got me there in the first place. And like I said, that you have to have that, otherwise you're going to burn out.
For sure.
So every part of the job, like, and some weeks you prefer doing this over that.
Yeah,
but
depending
just
on your mental state. And
I was surprised that I'm like, I actually overall prefer when I'm just by myself doing hands-on work.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Very truly, Anna also asked, do you usually hear the story of how a person has passed when you're working on them?
That's interesting. A lot of the times when they're older, I don't even really think to ask or to find out. I mean, a lot of times families will disclose just naturally through conversation, like, oh, they were battling cancer, or, you know, they lived a good long life and they just got sick and passed away, or just old age.
But it's not like written anywhere, like this person has died from XYZ.
I think on the death certificate, a lot of times it will say, but it can be kind of vague.
Okay.
If it's more specific, like a lot of the times, if we got a person, like a body through a coroner case, which is when the coroner passes a body to us, then the family wants to work with us to plan a funeral.
Okay.
Then I'm a little more interested in finding out, well, what happened to this person? Why were they at the coroner? Because a lot of the times that's when maybe they were murdered or they had an overdose. So yeah, when someone's old, I don't really think about why, but I suppose I could find out if I look at the death certificate or ask. But sometimes I just don't get to hear, and I don't think it's because I'm not interested. I think it's just because after a while, especially with older people, you've seen one, you see them all, so I don't know the story, but I could find out.
Yeah.
But and a lot of the times people fall and die at that age too, which is interesting. That's been more common than I thought it would be. But yeah, typically people are older, so it's usually just
I've heard, and I don't know if you're privy to this information,
please,
but I have heard that like people say, oh, they broke their hip.
Yeah, this is so interesting.
Or whatever. But it's that they fell and broke their hip is what people would say. But I've heard that it's actually that they break their hip and that's what causes the fall. Is
I've heard that too. And I actually was talking to my boss about that a few weeks ago. And he's like, I've heard that. And I think that's legit because people, when they get older, they just, their limbs and their bones are just not as strong as they were. And so they're just walking along and their hip breaks and then they fall.
Right.
And that's the thing too.
It's the chicken or the egg on that
one. It
one.
kind of is. Yeah. But the moment I heard about that, I was like, that just makes so much more sense.
Make more sense.
Because why are old people breaking their hips so much?
Exactly.
Like, people fall, but to fall and break something is, that's intense.
Right.
But anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, but short answer is, I do hear the story of how people pass away, but I think I've been there long enough where it's not to say that I don't care, but a lot of the times I don't really think to ask as much as I used to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it's all kind of the same.
Yeah. But do you feel like that you're more fascinated when it is like younger
Definitely.
people? Yeah.
Like coroner cases are like, oh, that's interesting. Or if someone younger comes in, it's like, oh, I'll ask my boss, like, hey, what happened to this person? Why did they pass away?
But it's not necessarily information that you need to know to do your job.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's not necessary. But sometimes when you learn, it does kind of help you go, oh, so this maybe explains why the skin here looks like this, or, oh, their arm has this bandage on it. Like, you get to find out. It kind of helps with that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Very truly, Anna also asks you, what's the spookiest thing you've seen?
People, this is the
question we all want to know.
People always ask this, and I feel lame not having a good answer because people expect, oh, do they ever move? Do they ever talk?
Do their eyes open?
Yeah. Things like that. And no, I've never seen anything like that. I think if you are moving somebody and they passed away recently, like within the last few hours, they might have some air in their lungs, and if that air is being pushed out through their
burp?
throat, not burp, but they can make like sounds. Like if air passes by their vocal cords, they might make a sound, but
Has that ever like really spooked you out?
I haven't had a story where it's been significant enough that I'm like, oh, what was that? But I know of other funeral directors who there was like a very more audible sound, like, oh, that was spooky. But so that can happen. I personally haven't had that happen really. And then the guy who cleans our building claims our funeral home is haunted because he's like, I see shadows and I hear doors slam. I have not experienced that. Wow. And I'm also...
But he's probably there at night, no?
No, he cleans during the morning, but he does. But he does like help out at viewings, which do happen in the evening, and I don't do those as much. So But I will say, I think he's inherently more superstitious, and I'm not a superstitious person.
Are you a little stitious?
No.
Yeah, none at all.
I don't believe in ghosts.
Okay.
So I'm sorry,
but I feel like
if
you're looking for it, you're gonna find it.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's not something you're looking for.
And that's the thing. So I think he is like trying to have that open mind, but I'm like, if I hear a door shut, I'm not going to think it's a ghost. I'm going to think the air turned on.
Has anyone ever come into your establishment and asked about those sort of things, or been like, I feel spirits here, or there has been
Yes. There are some communities around here that are spiritual, like the religions that they have. For instance, we have a pretty big Tongan community in a certain area around here, and they're very spiritual. They don't like to have bodies embalmed. They want the funeral done as soon as possible because they want to put their people to rest so that they can move on and have peace. And I remember a few months ago, these men came in to help like prepare the funeral, and one of them is just kind of standing casually next to me while other guys are doing stuff, and he goes, do you talk to them? And I'm like, I'm sorry? And he's like, do you talk to them, like the bodies? And I'm like, no. No. And he's like, I can hear them. I hear what I know what they're saying. And like, he's
you're like, please tell me.
And he's like, I actually really want to get into this business because I have that gift and blah, blah, blah. And I'm never really sure what to say to that, because I've heard that a couple times, people being like, I really can communicate with the dead and I really want to get in the funeral business because I can. And like, so I'm just like, oh, okay. Well, I'm like, that's interesting. Really interesting. Yeah. But no, people have come in and they're like, oh, I can feel this and that. And I'm just like, okay.
You do you, butto.
You do you, butto. Butto.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on here. Joshua O, our dear friend
Joshua,
has asked, this is a very fascinating question.
Okay.
If you could change one thing about how society or American culture specifically deals with death, what would it be?
I'm not going to tell people to cremate or to bury or to have a viewing. I'm not going to advise people on that.
Okay.
The men that I work with are a little more passionate about that. One of them specifically is like, I think we should have viewings. I think it's really important. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think people should do what they feel comfortable with, and maybe what their wishes were, what the family wants in order to be able to grieve properly. But it is interesting that in the last several years, cremation has become such a huge thing. And I do think partially it's because in our society, people don't know how to handle death. They just want to be like, I just want to get this done. I want to have grandma on the shelf, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think they would ever word it that way. I don't think they even see it that way. But I think people just want to just be done with feeling sad and be done with, okay, it's like this. I've thought about this a little bit in the last few days, actually. In Proverbs, it says, it's better to spend your time at funerals than at parties, because the man who thinks about death more than pleasure has more wisdom, and something along those lines. Yeah. And I've read that verse before, and I thought, well, I'm doing pretty good, because I go to like 5 funerals every week, and I do think about death a lot. But I think that's the thing, is we as a society, to answer your question, avoid thinking about death because it's a reality and it is uncomfortable. But I'm like, I think our society is really not addressing our mortality as much as we should. And cremations being more common, I think, is a symptom of that issue. Like, that's what I'm seeing. So my short answer is, I think Americans need to think about the fact that we're not going to be here forever. We're not immortal. Yeah. And kind of have to address that a little bit. Yeah. And I think it shows in the way that we live our lives and the here and now and satisfaction and our consumerism. It's a whole thing.
But you don't think there's anything inherently wrong with cremation versus...
No, I don't. I think there are some funeral directors who are passionate about that. And I think it's because of the generation I'm in. I'm a little more open-minded. But I'm like, I think people need to do what they need to do. Especially like if a cost is an issue for you, I respect that. If it's uncomfortable for you to have a casket and an open casket, I completely understand that. But yeah. That's my answer.
I like that. So
Thank you.
Sit with the grief a little bit.
Just a little bit. I just think
the reality
exactly.
of life, and
exactly.
It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. It's just true. And I think we all have to come to terms with it and maybe do that before you actually have to go to a funeral once in a while. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Joshua also asked us to lighten the mood a bit here. Are the smells bad?
Are the smells bad?
Yeah. Just...
Yes.
The smells of the bodies, the smells of the fumes.
The fumes.
The the chemicals.
The chemicals actually smell kind of sweet. Like
really?
Embalming fluid, it smells kind of sweet. And I don't know.
Is it formaldehyde?
People ask that. I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't necessarily know what all the chemicals are. And that's probably not good for me to be in the job I'm in and not know the details about that. I guess. Google that. But no, I think that is an element of the chemicals. But people are always like, oh, it's formaldehyde, right? And I'm like, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure that's probably part of it, though.
Yeah.
I also feel like you'd be able to smell formaldehyde because we all know that
and that's the thing. That's why I'm also saying I don't think it's primarily formaldehyde, because it does not smell like formaldehyde. Okay. So embalming fluid is usually like a cocktail of different things depending on what you need. Like if somebody is super jaundiced, like they've had liver failure, you're going to want to like change their coloring a little bit. So you're going to add some like dyes to bring the pink back into their skin. Like
what kind of dye?
So like imagine like a shampoo bottle.
Yeah.
That is, there's different brands of embalming fluid, but ours look kind of like shampoo bottles that are clear, and in each one is a different colored fluid. The ones that we use, we're pretty simple with what we do. We use ProFlow, which is just like, I think to put it simply, it just like helps. It's a thinner fluid that helps push the fluid through the body that you're trying to put in. We use like something called Rectifiant, and then we also have, I'm blanking on their names, which is super bad. But anyway, one of them kind of looks like carrot juice. It's like an orange color, and that's primarily, at least the way we do it, what the embalming fluid looks like. It looks like just a big vat of orange juice.
Weird.
And so I think mentally that also makes me feel like it smells kind of sweet.
You're like, ooh, orange juice.
But like we have some people who come in and do a lot of our embalmings for us just because we're a small operation and we need help. But people will come in and do our embalmings, and I'll be walking through the building and I can tell someone's been embalming because it just has this kind of sickly, sweet odor. Smell.
Interesting.
The bodies themselves, as far as smell, I've told people the first week on the job, I noticed it smells like kind of bad broccoli. Oh, that's what a dead person smells like to me.
Awful.
The other thing is,
so can you eat broccoli now?
Yeah, it's not a problem. Okay. But I've told so many of my friends and family this, that they're like, I can't look at broccoli the same way. And I'm like, I get that. Yeah. But to me, it kind of just smells like bad vegetables.
That's a horrible smell. Mm-hmm. You know when someone's cooked broccoli and you come into the house and you're like, ooh, broccoli.
That's one of the smells. The other one that is the worst, because I'm not that sensitive, but this is one that kind of gets to me is, and for those of you listening, this might be a little bit intense. So if you want to skip forward, you can, because I'm going to talk about coroner cases. But when the coroner does an autopsy, they cut the body basically from shoulder blade to shoulder blade, and then down the sternum down to like the top of your crotch area to open up the skin, to take out the ribs, to look at the to the organs and things like that. So when that has happened and I pick up a body from the coroner, that smell is the worst, because you're smelling open organs.
Their body. Yeah.
The actual body.
Of their body.
I can smell what's on the inside of a person's body. And I don't know how to describe that. Okay, I might have to cut this, but this is my honest answer.
Okay.
If you're a girl, you'll really know what this smells like. It kind of just smells like period blood.
Oh, that's not a good smell.
But like times 10.
Ooh, yeah, that's rough. That's rough.
So that's...
So the smells are bad.
The smells are bad, but I'm not as sensitive to some people, because my bosses are like, oh, it stinks in here. And I'm like, oh, I can't really smell that. So maybe
You're already used to it.
I don't know. It's funny. So yeah, the smells are bad, but I think it depends on who you are, because it doesn't necessarily bother me, but you can tell when it's time to bury somebody. Let's just say that.
Yeah. And do you feel like the way they die dictates that smell
Not at all.
Really?
Not at all. There's no rhyme or reason to that. Like, someone could have had a very traumatic injury and there could be fluids and all this, and it's like, not that bad. And other times people pass away peaceful and you're like, why is this one a stinker?
Interesting. And does their age dictate that at all?
Not at all.
Okay, so there's no
rhyme or reason. And there's also no rhyme or reason. Maybe people who've done more research have more on this, but there's no rhyme or reason to why some people like decompose faster than other people. Like, I don't think it's about your health. I don't think it's about your age. It's just some people are like, this one's a stinker.
That's interesting.
It is interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what the science behind all that
I
is.
know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good questions, Joshua.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, guys.
Along for the ride 2022_2023 asks us, or you, not me. I don't know the answers.
Well, you could give it a shot.
What's something you didn't want to know but learned about someone while dealing with their body?
Okay, the first thing that comes to mind when I hear this question is I'm thinking about tattoos, which I don't know if that's exactly what this person is looking for an answer, but the first thing that comes to my mind is you see people at their most vulnerable, so not just dead, but also completely naked.
Yep. On display.
And you maybe can see some tattoos that a lot of people, apart from maybe some intimate partner or spouse, never gets to see.
Right.
The first thing that comes to mind, just kind of on it's a sad note because this person was younger, but it was kind of cute. This girl who was probably roughly your age, my age, she passed away. She was going to be cremated, and I saw she had like a Coraline tattoo and a Nightmare Before Christmas tattoo. And I think you can tell a lot about people by their tattoos. And so I kind of get a glimpse into this is who this person was. This was their personality. Oh, another thing that reminds me of is a lot of women have gorgeous nails.
Oh, really?
Like, older women get wonderful manicures.
Yes, older women do prioritize that, it seems.
So if you're about to pass away, maybe get a manicure. Oh, my word. Really nice.
Think it's coming. I'm going to the salon.
Yeah, you're like, I can feel it coming on.
It's like an engagement before the old.
Exactly. But yeah, some people have great manicures, and I think that says a lot about a person, too, like the way that they care about their looks and stuff. Some women are balding, and they'll have wigs, which I think is interesting. But anyway, as far as the tattoos, a couple of weeks ago, there was this man, and he had this tattoo of this woman on his chest that was just aggressively large.
Oh, my goodness.
And she was like, some naked woman on his chest. And I was like, this is insane. And
it was a naked woman?
I'm pretty sure it was. I can't remember exactly. Wow. But it was huge. And it was just like, man, that was a choice.
Was he an older guy?
He was probably in his late 60s, yeah. But it was just like,
wow.
Hey, see, not very many people probably got to see that, but I did. And I love that. Very special.
But has there ever been a time where you're like, oh my goodness, I did not need to see that?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean,
It is what it is, honestly.
It is what it is.
Yeah. All right. Good question.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, Treasure Planet Jim Xara has asked you.
What's a complicated handle?
It is. I like it though.
Cute.
What's the most satisfying part of the embalming process? Like this question.
I like it too. I feel like there's so many answers to this.
First of all, is it a satisfying process?
Such a satisfying process. I get nervous before I embalm. I've done it at least 25 times, which in the grand scheme of being a funeral director isn't many. Right. I don't embalm that often.
25 more than I've ever done, baby.
There you go. 25 more than most people will ever do. But I get really nervous before I embalm just because sometimes it can be difficult to find the vein, and then to find the artery is a lot easier than finding the vein.
Which is in the...
So if you make an incision under the right side of your collarbone, it's about 4 inches in size, and then you take 2 aneurysm hooks, which are basically, they look like little shepherd's crooks.
Okay.
And then you, for lack of a better phrase, dig in there.
Okay,
and then
nice.
You get past a chunk of muscle, you open that up, and then you pull up a vein. And then
with the crochet hook.
With the hook, and then you tie a string around that just so you have it out and about. Like
a floss.
Yeah, the ones we use are like butcher string.
Okay.
And then you dig deeper and find an artery. And that alone is a satisfying process to me. Is like, we did it. We found
stressful.
It. That's the most stressful part, generally.
To locate all the things.
There's other things that can be stressful, but that's probably one of the more stressful parts of the process. But it's also the most satisfying when I find them and I tie them off and I'm like, we're ready to go.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But as far as embalming itself, people go to funerals and they see their grandpa and they go, oh, he just looks so weird to me, which that's reasonable because you've never seen grandpa that still. Even if you've seen grandpa sleeping, there's a movement, there's a life there.
The soul is gone.
It's just so different.
It's just a shell.
And I understand that. But another thing I want to tell people is like, you don't even realize grandpa looked a certain way when we got him. We embalmed him. We put the makeup on. We put his clothes on. And like, we'll never know what grandpa looked like to you. But when he came to us, he has completely transformed from when he first came to when he's in his casket. The color is back in him. He's clean.
He's lively.
Exactly.
As lively as...
Right. It's just different. So that's to me, the short answer to that question is seeing the color return to somebody's body. Because there's sort of like, as you could imagine, you've seen movies, kind of like a grayness to people. A lot of the times blood has sort of pooled into their ears. So their ears are purple, their face is discolored. But once we get the fluid moving through them, you can just see that color returning, and there's a pinkness and an evenness through the legs and the toes and the hands, and mostly, the head and the ears. Like, that's really satisfying to see. And I think that's the thing,
transformation.
Is like, right. And only a funeral director will be able to see that difference because they saw it right before. So anyway.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Long answer long, that is a satisfying part to me.
That's awesome. Well, that leads us kind of into our next question from Tara Thorsvik. She asks you, how long do you take to do makeup?
Okay. Makeup.
And kind of like what that process is like.
So just for me personally, everyone who asks, what's your favorite part of your job? Doing the makeup is my favorite part. Recently, that's become my favorite.
Yeah. Because you're an artist.
Yeah, I'm an artist. And I feel like because I'm an artist, and when I was hired, my boss said, oh, you're going to love doing that because it's artsy and whatever.
Right.
And I didn't quite see that at first, but as time has gone on and I've gotten kind of my way of doing it, it is an art form and I really enjoy it. It's really satisfying. Makeup takes about 20 minutes to do for average.
Okay.
If someone is an older person, their skin has kind of that same papery quality. When you embalm someone, they become very stiff and very hard, and obviously they're very cold. But when someone's older, they all kind of have the same skin texture. And if you're a woman, the only difference is I'm going to add lipstick.
Okay.
But I take a lot of pride in that part of my job because a lot of people will see a body in a casket and go, wow, they look like a clown. I think that's the old tried and true cliche. I don't think that's been the case as much recently. I think the craft has gotten a lot better, but I try really hard to make people look natural.
Okay, pause. Do you feel like because of makeup trends in society, as those change, do you feel like that changes funeral directors' hand in that region?
Maybe because back in, let's say, the 80s,
right,
when people
blue
had
eyeshadow, tons
and like
of blush,
very tan, the blush thing, that probably has a lot to do with it. That's a really good point. But today, like the most of like the extracurricular makeup I'll do on, say, a woman is, like I said, lipstick. And then if I'm feeling crazy, I'll dab a little lipstick onto my glove and dab it onto her little cheeks and make her look like a little blush. And that brings life back into their face.
Yeah.
But I try to keep it very simple.
Yeah.
And so do my bosses. They're pretty simple.
Are there any people who are like, here's a photo of my grandma. Yeah. Can you make her makeup and everything look exactly like that?
You know, people haven't been super intense about that. We do look at photos, not every time.
Yeah.
But if people had because some women do have a very specific look.
Right.
But if that's the case, the family usually also will provide their lipstick to us. Like, this is the color she always wore. And that's pretty nice because you and I know as girls that when you add a certain color lipstick, you're like, oh.
It can look so different depending on their skin tone.
So the lipstick I usually use is a pretty mauvey. It's purple, red, and pink. It's like a very neutral thing. So I think it looks fine on everybody. But if, someone's like, she wore a red lip, she has to have this one.
Yeah.
That's very specific to them. One time, a lash technician came in and did lashes.
Oh, really?
And she's like, that's the first and last time I'm ever doing this. This was horrible. I'm like, I think just because it spooked her.
Yeah, I can understand.
It made her uncomfortable.
I mean, doing lashes on someone who's dead as opposed to your job.
Well, and like we have hairdressers come in and do hair sometimes. Okay. Especially if they used to do that person's hair. But I'm like, that's got to be a little bit
that's
spooky.
Heavy.
It is. And so I'm like, that's a lot to ask somebody. But that is a thing they do. But anyway, I just do like a base coat. It's called blonde, which is like this light orange color, which you think would look weird, but it actually just helps bring like some color back into their face.
That goes all over like foundation.
Yeah, I basically put that all over the face, neck, into the ears, around the ears, any skin that's exposed, maybe their hands and arms.
Okay.
And then there's one called suntan, so I'll put that kind of on their T-zone, like their forehead, their nose, chin, top of the lip, top of the cheekbones, maybe the tips of the ears.
So kind of contouring,
knuckles-ish. Kind of just to like be like, this is where blood would be in your face. Like, if you have blush in your cheeks, blush on your nose. Yeah. Like the sun hits your forehead, you're going to be tanner there. Something I've started doing recently that I've noticed is people's ears are still somewhat discolored. So I find a color to match their skin tone and I'll put that on the ear and that also helps them not look so bad. Yeah. And a lot of the times with older people, their arms and their hands will be kind of discolored, like they'll have dark spots. So if there's any dark spots, I try to find a color that'll match that, and that makes people look so much younger.
Yeah, I bet.
Like I've really enjoyed doing that, especially recently. I started kind of tapping into that. And I think that's something my bosses, I don't think they're bad at it, but because I'm an artist, I think I might just have a slightly better eye than they do for color matching. Yeah. So I've really enjoyed it.
You're also a woman, which I feel like you just have a natural bend towards.
I mean, I do think that helps.
Looks nice and it doesn't.
One time this younger gal passed away and her signature makeup look was a cat eye.
Yes.
Have I told you this story?
No.
Okay. So in anticipation for her funeral, I brought in liquid eyeliner from my home, which I would donate to the cause. And I was like, because there's no way this little black pencil
at work. That's so nice of you, Greta.
Because I'm like, her mom was insistent, like she has a cat eye. Aww. And I'm like, this is important. Yeah. So I thought ahead. I was like, I need to bring this in. So I brought in my liquid liner, being like, we're going to do her makeup tomorrow. This needs to happen. My boss goes, how are we going to do this? And I said, I actually brought an eyeliner. I'm going to go downstairs and grab it. And we can do this.
Oh, no.
I go downstairs to grab the liner. In the time that I've been gone and I come upstairs,
he's tried it.
He has hacked away with this pencil, doing this thick. And everyone who uses eyeliner knows if you're trying to get a cat eye, do not use a pencil.
Don't use pencil.
So he's a man in his 60s using a pencil to do this cat eyeliner, which is her signature look. So this is when I first started my job and I was nervous and I didn't feel like I had a lot of autonomy and I wasn't very brave. And so he asked me, is this good enough? I was like, it's good enough. But in my heart, I was like, they're not going to be pleased with this. So that's something I don't necessarily
regret. You went back with your Neutrogena makeup wipes later that
like,
day.
If this happened today, I would have
been like, no, let me do
getting rid of this.
I have so many questions about that, but I'll just start with like, I have so many questions about why just on a why he was like, oh, I'm going to do this as Greta is going down to get
do not even ask me. I could have a whole other podcast just about the idiosyncrasies of working with a 65-year-old man.
Exactly. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, she said she's going to get eyeliner. Why are you attempting it?
Trust me, this is a daily occurrence. These kind of behaviors. Yeah. This is, tell me about it.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
Yeah.
But you put makeup on men as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So basically with men, it's a little different than women. I basically just use the suntan.
Okay.
Just do a basic layer. Yeah. We do put like a thing on their lips, but it's just like a brown color. And that just kind of helps
bring a little life back in.
A little life. And
some blush, you'd say, too? Bring color into the cheeks?
I mean, the suntan, you just go a little heavier on the cheekbones.
Okay.
And
yeah.
If they're bald, you kind of just go back further on the head with it. And sometimes people wear hats, which is interesting. And
do you wear gloves to do this, or is this raw dogging
100%. Okay. I use gloves for every single tiny task I do.
Good.
Another idiosyncrasy of my boss's is he says to me, if I didn't have to wear gloves while embalming, I probably wouldn't. And I'm like, dude, I wear gloves to open certain doors in this building. That's what I'm saying. I'm not messing around. Yeah, no. Like, nuh-uh. Yeah.
Love it. That was really fascinating.
Thank you. Okay. I hope so.
All right. Alice_Heidi_ asked you, can you get sick from a dead body? / what precautions do you morticians take?
So, gloves.
Yes.
As we just talked about, we have a couple different types of glove. Like, one's very thick. Those are ones we would probably use for more intense cases where there's a lot of fluid. If you're embalming, you should maybe double glove up. One time my doctor said, you need to be very careful when you're embalming because this is not a joke. Like, you're working with really heavy chemicals. People can get cancer from it, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, terrifying.
We'll see how that goes for me as time goes on. But if you're embalming, a lot of people recommend wearing eye protection. Some people wear like a full face visor.
Mask.
You kind of similar to a doctor, you would kind of wear a scrub type robe. Yeah. Kind of like a bathrobe, but it's covering your whole front.
That makes sense.
And you
wear that. You do.
I do that. Again, my bosses are very cavalier. They don't do that. But I'm like, I'm literally going to cover every stem to stern of this here lady.
Exactly.
But so you do that. A lot of times you can get shots. Like, you should get a hepatitis B shot because Hep B is a hazard at work. Yeah, just
is that transferred through blood?
Yes.
Okay.
To my knowledge. Yeah. And I wash my hands constantly. Shower almost every day. Especially, I shower for sure if I have been dealing with bodies that day. So yeah, I haven't had a problem with it. I don't know anyone in the field personally who has had issues with it, but we do take precautions. I don't think it's as, I could be wrong about this, I don't think it's as dangerous as people might think it might be, because you are working with dead people and there's diseases out there, but I don't think necessarily more or less than any other job out there that works with other people in general. Just be safe, wear gloves, wear a mask, wash your hands, take a shower. Okay, don't be stupid.
So you can get sick from not the dead bodies necessarily. Well,
I mean, if they had a
bloodborne disease,
things like that. Like, and that's when we try to communicate in the office, like, hey, just so you know, this person died from this. So speaking back to say very Juliana's question about knowing how someone died, it might be good to communicate in the office just so you guys know this person had Hep B or this person maybe even had COVID. Sometimes
so take extra precautions.
Just be aware. But yeah,
cool. She also asked, based on your work, how would you plan your funeral? Bury or cremation, etc.?
Honestly, I've thought about this, and I genuinely just think if I have children someday and I have Thomas and grandchildren,
you'll let them make
whatever they want to do. I do not care.
Okay.
I'm not passionate about it for myself. If people are passionate, they can be, but I guess, I'm not going to be there to see it.
Can you speak to, because I know you've mentioned this to me before, like, it's not as graceful as people might think, and like, is there anything
like cremation?
Well, cremation, and also like how you guys sometimes have to handle the bodies. Like, people think one way is more respectful than another. Yeah. Do you feel that way, or do you feel?
I definitely think people, again, because America especially is leaning so heavily toward cremation. Right. I think people think that it's some like very Viking-esque send-off where there's fire and it's less work for my family. It's not as creepy as seeing me in the casket, but
it's
also
romanticized.
It's romanticized in the sense that so in our building, we don't do cremations in our building. We outsource that because we don't have a cremation on site. Mm-hmm. So we work with a place that has a crematory.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of my job is I take bodies to the crematory and then I take the ashes back with me later that day or later that week. Mm-hmm. And it's not a glamorous send-off. Mm-hmm. I mean, I take the body there, I unload, put them in the cooler, and then the men who do the cremations there unload the body in the box and shove it into the cremation, and
they put the body in a box.
Yeah, so
that goes into the
so it's a cremation tray. It's at least the way they do it, it's a box of probably about 6 inches high, mm-hmm. With a plastic lining. It's the size of a person, like it's probably about 7 feet long by 4 feet, 3 feet.
Okay.
And then, I just place that person in that box and put them in the cooler.
Is that your job?
That's
to
my
move
job.
The body into that box?
Mm-hmm.
And have you always been able to do that by yourself?
If someone's about 300 pounds, that's when it gets a little hairy for me.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I'm able to move people. My most comfortable, most heaviest person is probably like 255. After that, it gets a little bit heavy for me to move in and out of
255 is impressive, though.
I worked my way up to that.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting.
And I don't think it's necessarily, I have gotten stronger, but it's also like I've gotten braver. I'm like, you can be a little bit more,
have some oomph.
You can get a little oomph behind it. You're not going to hurt them, and it might hurt myself.
Right, exactly.
People get heavy.
Be more worried about you than that person who's dead.
Exactly. And the crematory we work with, if someone weighs over 250, they have a rule that you have to use an oversized cremation tray, which is like a bigger box. And that's just so that the box doesn't break while they're putting it into the crematory, because if the box breaks on its way being put in the fire, that's a hazard, because the fire can come out
that makes sense.
Of the space that it needs to be in. So it's just a safety issue.
Sure.
But as far as, so back to the question is, no, you're good. You're good. As far as just like, cremation's not necessarily glamorous.
Right. But the other process is not necessarily glamorous.
It's not glamorous until you're in the casket.
Right. Then it's more peaceful.
But that's another satisfying part of my job is you see someone at their most vulnerable, but then you put their clothes on them and you can kind of see, this is the person they were. And you put their makeup on and you put them in the casket with a nice cushy pillow under their head. And there's flowers and nice lighting and music. And it's just a more peaceful situation. And that's what the family gets to see. Then for some people, that's really nice. So for me, from my perspective, I would say cremation's a lot less. I don't want to say it's disrespectful, but it does seem a little bit less respectful somehow. But up to you as a person who's
so you
that.
Have no bias one way or another, and for yourself personally, you're like,
no,
you don't care.
I don't care what they do to
you're
me.
Dead, so
exactly, I won't care. So whatever people need to do to grieve for me, go for it, guys. Yeah.
Incandescent Smirk has asked you, if you're cremated, how much of the ashes are your ashes, and how much are the previous participants' ashes?
That's really interesting. That's a cool question, because I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think to ask that.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Again, because I personally have not performed a cremation, I don't know if this is the correct answer, but from what I've observed, when someone is cremated, the temperature in the cremation is so hot. I've heard your body kind of basically explodes and then you burn down to ash. Sometimes if they have like pacemakers or like hip replacements and metal in their body, that melts in the crematory. But sometimes there's things left over, like big chunks of bone, maybe things like jewelry might be left over if it didn't melt.
Weird.
So they have to sort that out later.
Okay.
That's just a sidebar.
Yeah.
Back to the question. They have this really long, it looks like a rake. The handle part of it is probably 10 feet long.
Okay.
And the end is just like a solid rake. It doesn't have like teeth. It's just like a block.
Okay.
They reach into the crematory oven with that tool and they scrape the ashes, I believe it goes down into a container at the bottom of the machine. So they scrape it into a hole and it goes down into that. So I think with that tool, they're able to get everything that is in there. So in theory, the ashes that are in the bag for the family when they take you home are just you.
Okay.
But the likelihood is there are remnants of other people, but not a significant amount.
Because, I mean, that is, some of it's got to be a fine amount of dust, right?
So ashes, I think in the movies, when you see ashes, it looks like a very powdery thing. And when you're pouring it out in the wind, it's all romantic and it puffs away. But ash, I was really surprised to find, is very gritty and grainy, almost like a sandy, very coarse, sand.
Okay.
And there can be like little chunks of bone. It's not what I expected. It's not powdery. It's like sand.
Interesting.
It's heavy. But yeah, so
which would be easier to rake out than all of
exactly. So it's
remnants.
Not just powder that's flying around in the machine.
Really fine powder that could easily.
It's heavy like a kinetic sand sticking to the sticking to the base of the crematory.
Okay.
So you just scrape it out, and so the likelihood is there are probably a little bit of other people, but not to the amount where it's like, wow, I wonder how many people are in this bag with grandma. Like, it's really not like that.
Pretty much just grandma.
Yeah, pretty much just grandma in here. We go to spread grandma's ashes, and like, there's probably a little bit of Bill and Ted and their fabulous adventure in here.
Okay. All right. Becca Ebenroth has asked you, how long did it take you to get used to hanging out with the dead at work?
That's a cool question.
I love it.
The first day on the job, I quickly ran off to a funeral to help with that funeral. So the body I saw was in a casket, which I've seen before. I've been to funerals throughout my life.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily count as my first, but like that same day we went and had to find, there's some guy in the cooler who we were missing some paper for, and sometimes the paper is with that person, so we went to go try to find this paper. And I remember having to like gird my loins mentally, being like, this is it, you're gonna like see one kind of in the raw, so to speak. And like, this is a moment where I don't want to act scared because this is my job, but like, how often do people just get exposed to that?
Yeah, it's a little jarring.
I was like, this is it. This is the moment. And I saw him, and it was just so jarring to me, because when you see someone in a casket, they're laying really nicely.
Peacefully, they're put together.
Exactly. But this was just like a very unique experience to see this man. Their bodies are somewhat contorted sometimes when they die, and he did not look peaceful. And I remember just being kind of in shock for just a moment. And then when that moment passed, I was like, I'm good. And ever since then, it was not a problem.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically, I
just
saw
that
one
first body.
Because to a certain degree, you've seen one, you kind of have seen them all, because they're very similar most of the time. And seeing that was like, okay, I guess I'm good. So there have been moments where you kind of snap to and you go, oh my word, like,
this is what I'm doing.
This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm interacting with. But that was basically the moment where I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
So
my question to you is, has anything ever gotten to you where you thought about it after work, where it's come home with you, or you still think about to this day, or anything like that?
Good question. I was worried about that. I remember when I asked a couple morticians in the area about their job, that was one of my questions, because I was concerned about that, because I'm a very empathetic person.
Right.
And I think females generally have a harder time separating from work, especially if it's something so emotional like death. But I was surprised that I don't really bring work home mentally at all.
That's awesome. That's so good.
You know, if people lost a loved one, I don't know that person.
Right.
I'm not experiencing that grief the way that family is. Now, if someone was younger, like our age, or a baby or a child, that kind of affects me a little more, because I think about how that grief would feel for that fammy. And it's a different thing than when someone who's 90 passes away. So that kind of affects me. The one, and then this is a little different, but one time there was a coroner case where I watched the people who come in and help embalm, because that was beyond my abilities. I wasn't able to embalm
at that point.
That and also when people have had autopsies, the embalming process is a little different just because things aren't connected the same way when the organs have been removed. So I had to watch that one, but it was like just visually a little bit difficult to see. It was, for a lack of a better word, very horrific, like kind of creepy looking. And I've been surprised that kind of stuff hasn't affected me, but in that moment I remember seeing just certain things and I thought, this is kind of freaking me out a little bit.
That's rightfully so.
And that's one time where I thought, oh, I feel a little bit creeped here. But overall I have been super surprised that I don't really take work home at all.
Can you close your eyes now and visualize what that looked like?
That's the thing, is that is an image that sticks with me.
Right.
A lot of other times it's like, surprisingly, I don't think I have trauma.
Yeah. You'll find out later.
Well, that's the thing. One of my coworkers one time, she said, we get so much trauma in this work as it is. And I remember thinking, are we? Because I feel okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I crazy but I'm like, will I have to deal with this later?
Right. Who knows?
Maybe. But that was one instance where I thought, ooh, that's some imagery that is kind of creepy.
It's gonna stick with you.
Freaking me out a little bit. But again, it's like, I still see the calling in it and like someone has to do it, and I'm glad that I can handle it enough to do it for somebody. So
that's beautiful.
In that sense, I'm like, it's okay. I'm glad to help.
So
I don't know.
Well, there's one more question that I have written down here. If you're still,
I'm kicking.
If you're hanging in there.
I wonder how the people listening are hanging in there. I hope it's been interesting and it's not just, I
think it has, and I don't think we've delved too far into anything crazy.
Yeah, no, this is pretty much the basics.
Yeah. Okay, Jules says, has there ever been anyone crying inconsolably, or any families that just you don't know what to do or you don't know how to help them through?
So this is the thing, like I said, when I got into this business, I was like, I just really want to help people because this is going to be like a sad, very difficult emotional time for people. But yeah, being faced with people who are just grieving so openly and with so much passion and just, reckless abandon, as they should, because this is the space to do that. Sometimes I've stood there and thought, what's required of me in this moment?
Exactly.
Am I supposed to physically, put a hand on the shoulder, be there? Do you want to hug me? I'll be here for that. Or should I stand off and let you do your thing?
Right.
Because everyone's different
and needs different things.
You do your best to judge how to be helpful. And I don't think I'm bad or good at it. I just think that's something that's been challenging is and it's not often that I'm faced with like, oh, I don't know what to do here. Because, people have each other. People have their own families that are there to help them with that.
But how much is that really your job?
And that's the thing. The only time I'm ever really faced with it is when a single family member comes in wanting to have a private viewing or to do their makeup or hair, because sometimes they'll want to help or dress them. And I'll be there to maybe like chaperone the situation or, walk them through it.
Right.
And that's always a little uncomfortable when they, first see them. That brings the emotions up and they cry. And then I think, what should I do here? And you just kind of read the room and do your best. I remember one time there was a funeral where a woman's husband passed away, and they weren't particularly young, but they weren't super old. She was probably in her 60s.
Okay.
And she was really struggling, as I can only imagine someone would.
Right.
And she was hyperventilating. And we got her water, but she blacked out, and it was just pretty intense. And so that's probably the craziest I've seen, but it does happen. And, again, because other family is there, you just kind of are hands off and let them be there together handling it. But as a funeral director, you are there to help kind of guide people to be like, this is the space for this, and let me help you how I can. Let me get you water or smelling salts or whatever is necessary here. But yeah, there have been people who, when a viewing starts, you can always tell when it started because there's suddenly a din of crying. And it's kind of weird to sit there and go, whoa, this is my job. I'm just listening to this. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a big difference in the way funerals go depending on their beliefs.
Definitely.
You could probably feel that difference too.
So. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Greta, any last thoughts, words, stories that you want to share with us about this fascinating job? I really enjoyed hearing about it.
Oh, have you? I hope so.
You guys out there have enjoyed it, because I think it's a really interesting field that we don't hear many of the ins and outs of, or people are scared of it, or there's a lot of misconceptions, I feel like, with this job.
Definitely. I mean, and people only go to plan maybe one funeral in their whole life, or two for a family member, and so you're not going to just know the ins and outs of what it's like. And so I see everything every day, and so if people ever have questions, like, just ask. I mean, I think funeral directors especially are like, if you're curious, it's completely normal to want to know about.
Do you guys do like tours at your?
I've wanted to. I think our building is a little bit run down. I'd feel embarrassed about certain parts of the tour. I'm going to be honest with you, but I have thought about, like, if high schoolers wanted to, because Mom said when she was in college she toured a funeral home or two as a nurse.
Well, guys, hit Greta up if you want to tour of the establishments. Can we see the freezers? What ins would you show people?
Before I started my job, I visited a funeral home because they were willing to let me come in and see, and they took me to the cooler. They're like, "We're going to show you this because this is a part of the job."
Did you see dead bodies right then?
I did, and that was also a little bit like, "Oh, that's real."
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but just ask questions, and if this is something that you are interested in doing as a job. First of all, in my experience, I didn't have any experience before I did it.
Right.
I just reached out and contacted people. If this is something you're interested, send emails, send calls, like ask, there's funeral homes in your area. Just give them a call and say, hey, are you hiring? A lot of the entry-level positions are funeral directing assistants, which is what I did initially. And then a couple months in, that's when I started my apprenticeship. Apprenticeship in our state is a 3-year-long process, and you should do school alongside that process. It's like a 2-year degree. But anyway, it's an entry-level position to my knowledge. So if this is something that interests you, just reach out and ask questions. Go and tour a funeral home. Find a funeral director and ask them more about their job. Go on YouTube, do research.
Listen to this podcast.
You're
already on the right path.
Watch The Haunting of Hill House, because that's going to be the best education. No.
Yeah.
But just ask questions, and if you're interested, give it a try. But like I said, if you are only there because you're fascinated with death, you're not going to last long.
Yeah,
I would not recommend it.
Yeah.
If you have a heart for people and you want to do something that serves people, this might be a good option for you, even if you've never thought about it. If you are graduating high school and you're not sure what to do with your life and you want to take a gap year and work, and this is something that interests you, I think this would be a good thing to do during a gap year.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with that. And no way to know until you get in there and get some experience.
Exactly. So, just if you're interested, it's not to be punny, but it is a dying field. And it does need more young blood, and it does need more interest. And we need to spread the word that it's a really good job, and it's a good ministry, and it's a cool calling. And
okay, I love the way that we're wrapping this, but I just thought of a question I wanted to ask.
Yeah,
is there like some sort of what's the word?
How you say
when two teams don't like each other, there's a
rivalry.
Is there any rivalry between you guys and other funeral homes in the
It is
area?
Extremely cutthroat.
Really? You're all fighting for the dead?
Well, it's more, kind of, but it's more like family-owned versus industry-owned funeral homes. That's where the contention lies, because industries are huge companies that go through and buy, say, family-owned funeral homes, and they just industrialize them. So a lot of times funerals become more expensive through that, and they're not necessarily as interested in relations with people as much as making money. And I'm not going to speak to that. I think people who work for an industry still have heart for people.
Yeah, you have to.
But it is like, if you are looking for a more personalized experience, maybe go to a family-owned funeral home. But there is definitely drama in the industry.
Wow.
I don't necessarily want to partake in it, but I'm also not really involved in it.
Right.
I don't own the business.
Right.
And I don't know a lot of people in our business. But it's a tight-knit community. Like, we do have friends who have other funeral homes, and we'll, like, if we need stuff, we ran out of supplies, we'll go and ask them for help. We try to help.
No, you can't have my stretcher.
No, for real. It is interesting because we do have beef with certain funeral homes.
That's so weird.
And we have alliances with other ones.
Wow, that's so funny.
And then there's also like the drama of crematories versus funeral homes. There's a little bit of tea there. It's kind of the Romeo and Juliet of funeral business as well. But yeah, no, it's just like with any industry. There's tea.
There's tea. And there's drama.
Like literally, sometimes our bosses are like, "Oh, I don't like that guy." Or,
oh my goodness.
We
grown men.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, okay, buddy,
get over it.
Get over it. I'll go talk to him. I don't care.
Send you to do their bidding for them.
It's interesting, but yeah.
And lastly, can you be buried with your animals and your possessions and
yes, if
other people?
So I'm not sure about like if you have a dog that passed away some time around when you pass away. Like the corpse of your dog, I don't think that can be buried with you.
Okay.
I might be wrong about that. If you have your pet's ashes, put the ashes in with your casket. That's totally fine.
And possessions and things like that.
If you're going to bury ashes, mix other people's ashes with your ashes. Put everything in the same urn.
Okay.
That's all fine. If you want to be buried with all of your chiz, like if you want your books and letters and photos and flowers and blankets and your favorite dress and your other favorite dress that you're not actually wearing and all your makeup and your hair clips and bows and your favorite One Direction album, you can throw those in. If it fits, it sits. Like, go for it.
Is that your guys' phrase?
I just said that.
Wow, I wish you should put that on a pillow and put it in the funeral home.
Exactly. They're like, what does this mean?
Well, that's awesome, Greta. Thanks for sharing with us today. I feel like it was
I've enjoyed
really
it.
intriguing and really enlightening.
I hope it's interesting. I hope I covered it. I hope it's
and the Lord bless you in this field.
Well, thank you.
Because it sounds like it's not for the faint of heart.
It's not for the faint of heart, but it is a really good job.
And it's important work, so good job.
It is.
Good on you.
I enjoy it.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys, for listening. This was super fun.
Yeah, thank you,
If you have questions more for Greta, put them down below.
Yeah, and you can always comment them on the Instagram. Maybe I'll answer if I didn't cover something you're questioning.
Right. So thanks, guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And
love you.
Thanks for tuning in. Love you, Greta.
Love you, Jenny.
Bye.
Bye.